When the judge asked my son, Ethan, who he wanted to live with, he didn't even hesitate. "My dad," he said. The courtroom seemed to go still. Even my ex-husband, Marcus, looked briefly surprised before smug satisfaction settled across his face. I sat frozen, trying to process what I just heard. My heart clenched so hard I thought I might pass out. Ethan was 16, old enough for his voice to matter in court, and it had sounded so certain, so final. We hadn't spoken since the day Marcus and I told him about the divorce. Ethan barely looked at me anymore, let alone talked. I tried to reach him over and over, but he always made an excuse. Homework, sleep, practice. And when he chose Marcus, I was devastated. I went home to a quiet apartment, hollow with the absence of the boy I'd raised, and sobbed into the couch cushions until sleep finally took me. Marcus and I had been married for 19 years, and by the end, I didn't recognize the man I once loved. The shouting, the manipulation, the cold silences. He was a master at twisting things until I felt like I was the problem, like I was crazy. I stayed longer than I should have because of Ethan, but in the end, I left because of him too. I didn't want my son growing up thinking that kind of love was normal, and now he was gone too. Weeks passed. Ethan's texts were sparse, mostly one-word answers. I told myself he needed time, that maybe he was angry. Maybe Marcus had filled his head with lies. It wouldn't be the first time. But then everything changed. One evening, I got a call. It was Ethan. "Can I come over?" he asked. His voice was low, tired. My heart leapt. "Of course," I said, trying not to sound too desperate. He showed up 15 minutes later, taller than I remembered, wearing that same gray hoodie he always wore when he was stressed. He didn't look at me when he came in, just dropped his bag and collapsed on the couch. "I've been recording him," he said. "What?" "Dad, I've been recording him." He finally looked at me, eyes shining. "The way he talks to me, the way he talks about you, the drinking. I set up a camera in the den, and I've got everything. I had to get it. I needed proof." I couldn't speak. "I told the court I wanted to live with him, so I could get it. I knew if I stayed with you, he'd just put on his nice guy act. But with me there, he's himself." I sat down beside him, stunned. "Ethan, I'm sorry," he said, his voice cracking. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I hated doing it. But I needed to show people what he's really like. And now I have." Tears blurred my vision. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't want you to stop me. You've always protected me, Mom. This time, I want to protect you." Ethan handed me a flash drive. "I want to come home." We submitted the evidence to the court the following week. The case reopened. Marcus's mask slipped fast under questioning, and the recording spoke volumes. Not just about his manipulation, but about the quiet, subtle abuse that had haunted me for years, in which Ethan somehow had seen more clearly than I ever realized. A month later, the judge granted me full custody. Marcus was ordered to attend therapy, and supervised visits were mandated if he wanted a relationship with his son. Ethan moved back in that same afternoon. We unpacked his things slowly in silence until he finally looked at me and said, "We're okay now, right?" I wrapped my arms around him and held on tight. "We're more than okay," I whispered. "You saved me." And he had. He really had. Ethan's return didn't magically make everything better. I wanted it to. I wanted to believe that love, justice, and coming home could erase the damage. But healing doesn't work like that. For the first few weeks, we danced around each other like strangers trying to remember an old song. The silence wasn't cold. It was cautious. There were questions I didn't ask, and pain he didn't speak of. We kept things light: movies, takeout, and late-night Mario Kart. At first, that was all we could manage. But one night, while we were doing dishes, Ethan finally said it. "Do you ever feel guilty for not leaving sooner?" I froze, a plate in my hand, water still running. "Yes," I said, "every single day." He didn't look at me when he nodded. "Me too." That's when I realized he wasn't just angry at Marcus. He was angry at me too, but not for the reason I'd feared. He was angry at the years' loss of fear, at the silence we both endured, At the times, I let things slide because I thought surviving was the same as protecting him. I'm sorry, I told him, for everything I didn't do. I know, he whispered. We stood there, water cooling in the sink, and for the first time, it felt like we were actually seeing each other again. Marcus didn't go down quietly. He called. He emailed. He showed up once, drunk, yelling in our driveway until the police escorted him away. That was the last time Ethan saw him. In court, he claimed the recordings were taken out of context, that Ethan had been coached. He tried to paint me as manipulative and unstable, but the irony of that didn't escape the judge. Ethan had done more than expose him. He'd shattered the illusion Marcus had spent years building, not just for the court, for himself. I got a restraining order. Ethan started therapy. So did I. The therapist told us something that stuck. Trauma doesn't always scream. It whispers. It builds slowly. And so does recovery. Ethan began speaking out, first anonymously on forums, and later openly in support groups at school. He wrote a piece of the school paper about emotional abuse and control, and they published it under his name. I watched him reclaim his voice, step by step. Sometimes I cried quietly from the kitchen while he spoke on Zoom calls with other teens navigating fractured homes. He didn't know that, and I never told him. Some things are ours to carry quietly. One night, he said, I think I want to study psychology, help people like us. I smiled. You already are. Part 5, My Son the Lighthouse. Now, 2 years later, Ethan's about to graduate. He got into 3 universities. His hair is longer, his laugh deeper, and his heart's somehow still open. He's not just surviving, he's shining. Sometimes, I still wake up in a cold sweat, haunted by the past. But now, when I walk into the kitchen and see his cereal bowl in the sink or his backpack by the door, I remember something important. He took his father's side in the divorce. But not because he chose him over me. He chose to fight a quiet war deep behind enemy lines. And he won, because he never really left me. He was saving me all along. 6 months before Ethan left for college, I found a letter in my old email drafts. It was dated the night he said he wanted to live with Marcus. I don't remember writing it. The subject line was empty, the body unpolished and raw. Ethan, if you've chosen him, I understand. I've failed you more times than I can count. But please know, whatever happens, I love you. Always. Even if you never come back. Even if I'm the villain in your story. I stared at the screen for a long time. My hands trembled on the mouse. I almost deleted it. Instead, I hit print, folded the page carefully, and tucked it into the book Ethan had been reading. The Body Keeps the Score, a few days before he packed it for school. I never asked if he read it. But 2 weeks after he moved into his dorm, I got a text. I never left you, Mom. Not even once. I just had to go dark for a while, like in the movies. And then, I'm okay now. You can rest. I sat in the car outside the grocery store and wept like a child. For the first time in years, I started sleeping without the light on. I repainted the house. Soft green in the hallway, warm gold in the living room. I filled the bookshelf with new paperbacks, even some romance novels. I let myself feel safe in my own space again. I stopped looking over my shoulder. But some nights, I still rehearse answers I'll never have to give. What I'd say if Marcus called, if someone asked why I stayed, or why I didn't just leave sooner. That question used to sting like a blade. Now I just whisper, because surviving is a process. And I did leave, and I won. Ethan came home over winter break with broader shoulders and a quiet calm that hadn't been there before. He hugged me at the airport tight, real, and said, "You look lighter." I smiled. "So, do you?" One night, while we were eating takeout on the floor of the living room like old times, he told me he'd been invited to speak on a panel at a youth mental health conference. "They want me to talk about surviving emotionally unavailable parents," he said, "and about covert abuse, the stuff people don't see." I paused. "Are you going to tell them everything?" Ethan nodded. "Yeah, but just my part, not yours." That struck me. He was carving out his own story. Not mine, not ours, just his, and I loved him for that. Because abuse doesn't end when the door slams shut behind you. It echoes. It lingers. But so does strength. I stopped apologizing. I used to apologize for everything. For the way I raised him. For staying too long. For not seeing the signs. For raising my voice. For crying in front of him. For being human. One day I stopped, not because I didn't feel the weight of those choices, but because I had already done the hardest thing. I had left. I had rebuilt. I had raised a boy who became brave enough to face the truth and use it to protect others. There's a photo on my fridge. Ethan and me, standing in front of his dorm last fall, his arm around my shoulder, my smile the real kind, not the polite practice one. People look at it and say, he's a good kid, and he is. But more than that, he's a survivor, a truth teller, a quiet warrior. He took his father's side in the divorce. But secretly, he was saving me. And maybe, just maybe, I was saving him too. Would you like to turn this into a full short story or even a memoir-style piece? I can help develop chapters, alternate points of view, or deepen themes like trauma, healing, and resilience. It was spring again, 3 years since the divorce, 2 since Ethan moved out, and 1 since I stopped waking up every day waiting for the next emotional aftershock. Ethan was home for a weekend, sorting through old boxes in the garage. He came into the kitchen holding something wrapped in crumpled tissue paper, small, square, and dusty. "I found this in Dad's stuff," he said, placing it on the table. I think he meant to give it to you. I unwrapped it carefully. It was a framed photo, me, holding baby Ethan, laughing, his tiny hand gripping my finger. On the back, Marcus had scribbled in pen, "She never stopped fighting." I just stopped watching. I stared at it for a long time. For the first time in years, my anger didn't flare. I felt nothing, and then, slowly, peace. A quiet knowing that I had done the best I could with what I had, and that Marcus, in his own broken way, had finally seen it. Maybe too late, maybe just in time. That night, Ethan and I sat at the table at the end of the hall, the one we never used. We ate pizza, just like we had the day I first got custody back. The same wobbly candle flickered between us. "What would you have done?" I asked. "If the court hadn't listened, if your plan didn't work?" Ethan smiled without looking up. I was never planning to lose. The way he said it, quiet, certain, not arrogant, just true, made something in my chest finally settle. I looked at the boy in front of me, now almost a man, and thought, he didn't just save me, he taught me how to save myself. And maybe that's what love really is, not fixing each other, but standing in the fire beside one another, saying, "I see you. I'll wait with you. I'll fight when you can't." Before bed, I passed his room and saw the old photo now standing on his desk. The past no longer haunted us. It had become part of the architecture of who we were. Not a prison, a foundation. And somewhere between the pain and the healing, a boy became a lighthouse, and his mother finally found her way home.